Well, thank you so much, everyone, for being here. Like we just briefly touched upon, this is a workshop that's brought to you by the City of Somerville Economic Development Division. It's hosted by Revby, which is the company that I work for, and I'll get to what we do in a bit. But this particular workshop is part of a series of workshops. This one is specifically towards digital marketing, but I would also say be on the lookout for other workshops because there are others that are being carried forth by the City of Somerville. So a little bit about Revby. What do we do here, right? We're basically small business technical assistance providers, and we provide business consultancy services and specific projects towards small business owners, entrepreneurs, and they come to us from all different types of backgrounds. So, like I said, they're chefs, they are businesses that are animal shelters, they are artists, they are real estate agents. So the whole lot, they're all in their different journeys, right? Some of them are just starting out, some of them are more experienced, some are even legacy businesses that have been around for more than 20 years. So what we're able to do basically is help them with any kind of business development assistance they need, if they need marketing and branding, which is personally one of my favorites. If they want some numbers done with, through financial planning, or if they're just looking for something like operational workflow. So we do touch upon all of the different business categories and pillars, you might say. But I think the one thing that I had to pick that makes me the proudest to be representing the group, but also, just something that I really value is that a small business owner has so many things that they need to look out for, right? They have finance, they have their content, they have to take care of people. And so when you're scattered like that, I think the best thing that can happen to you is that you gain focus, right? And so that's what I really like, is that we can help small business owners gain focus. And through that focus, you guys can make better decisions and hopefully get some work done. So that's the idea of Revby. A little bit about me. I've been working with the group since 2022. I graduated from Boston College with a master's in business administration, and I've been with them since. I worked with, like I said, so many different types of people, and the most rewarding part of this job is that I get to help people, right? I get to make a positive influence and an impact. And that goes a long way when it comes to giving back to society and just generally, making the world a better place, which I think at this point is definitely something that we can work towards. All right, that being said, the City of Somerville does also provide other TA programming initiatives. So what I would recommend is once you're wrapped up with the workshop, go to their website. If there's anything that appeals to you, feel free to reach out to Kelly, and I'm sure she'd be able to help you out depending on what is available for you to get help with. All right, so coming down to the actual workshop, right? The main idea here is that we want to build a real life understanding of marketing and how digital tools kind of supplement that whole marketing process, right? So what we want to start off with is marketing as a concept. I know marketing is one of those terms that is tossed around a lot, right? It coincides with sales. Everyone thinks this is the right way, or something else is the right way. But in order to achieve that understanding, we need to start with a common definition of what it is. So that's one of the first things we're going to start with. And then we're also going to touch upon what are the different trends, what's important, what's no longer important. We're going to talk about those things just a little bit. And then the main chunk of this workshop is going to be geared towards this third bullet point you see on the screen, which is a 5-step sort of digital marketing route, right? So this is taking what we discuss in terms of marketing as a concept and applying it through a real life scenario. And so that the idea here is you guys can take away tangible, actionable steps when it comes to digital marketing and the tools that you'd like to use. And of course, to round it off, we're going to leave you off with some digital tools, talk just a little bit about what the tech stack looks like. And then at the end of this, you will also have some best practice resources for you to just go through at your own time. So that's the agenda for today's workshop. Of course, the workshop is being recorded. I'm also happy to send across the slides through Kelly, so do not worry about taking notes. I'd love to get your focus and your understanding here more than anything. All right, so this is the question that requires a definition, right? What exactly is marketing? So marketing essentially, right? It comes down to people, comes down to understanding people and then learning from that understanding of people, meaning your audience, and applying it in different scenarios and across different goals, right? So the best way to think about marketing is not through a set like path of 1, 2, 3, 4, although it's easier to organize it that way. The best way to think about it is through answering some questions, right? And these questions can be categorized then into those more generalized buckets. So for example, on the right, you see the audience, the marketing goal, the messaging, and the channels, which are typical marketing lingo. But I want you to focus on the questions on the left, right? Without answering these questions, we would not get a better sense of what we're looking to do from a marketing perspective. But these questions are all you need to know, right? So what you want to do is you want to start with who your customers are. You need an understanding of your audience, your existing audience, those you want to work with, in fact, those you don't want to work with or sell to or deal with. We want information on them. So who are they, right? What do they really care about? What are they like? And when I say what they're like, I don't mean they're 20 years old or they're 50 years old. I mean, what are their psychographics like? What interests do they have? Where are they coming from? What are their emotional drivers? So we're looking at the psychographics more than anything else. Once we have an understanding of the audience, we get into our goal, right? Our intended goal. So what do I need them to do? Them being the audience here. How can they actually help my brand? Do I want to sell to them? Do I want more people to know about my brand? So what is that marketing goal exactly like? That's that second part that you see on the screen there. And once we have those two things solidified, that's where we can know, all right, I know who I'm talking to. I know what I want to get them to do. Now I need to figure out what I need to say to them, which in marketing lingo becomes your messaging. So what do you say to them and how exactly do you say it? This is important because in the same way that you wouldn't really, just casually chat up an executive or like a board member of a large corporation, you wouldn't similarly be super professional or super formal with someone who's your friend. So knowing the person that you're talking to and talking to them in the right way, that's definitely going to improve your chances of basically achieving the goal that you have in mind. And once you do that, what you want to know is where do I find them and where do they find me? So I want to have these conversations with them, but is it going to be on the street? Is it going to be on YouTube? Is it going to be on Instagram, LinkedIn, on a phone call? So what are those pathways that allow that conversation to get facilitated? Those are what we call channels. So what you see here on the screen, that's all marketing is. It starts from the people, goes on to what you want to achieve, goes on to how you want to say things to achieve that, and then where you want to host those conversations. And that's all it is. The other thing here to keep in mind is that you're going to, especially if you go on Google and you search, right, like best marketing tips or something like that, you are going to come across so many different tools, right? So the analogy that I like to make to explain this is that you have these different tools, such as your social medias, you have your CRMs, you have your POS systems like Toast or Klaviyo, right? You've got Google Analytics, you've got your website. These are all tools within your toolkit. So what you need to understand is based on my goal and based on the person I'm dealing with, which tool do I take out of the toolbox and make sure that, I do what I need to get done. And so you're going to have so many different things at your disposal. It's just a matter of picking the right one, which brings me to a really important point, is that there is no set, concrete, right answer in marketing ever. You're only going to learn through hit and trial. You're only going to learn through actually doing it. What works for someone else may not work for you. So the main idea here is not to get down to like an end list of things that this is the right way. There's never going to be such a scenario. You're always going to learn. You're always going to evolve because people evolve. And at the end of the day, marketing, I like to think of it as a people skill. So I really do want you guys to keep that in mind as we're going through this. Eventually, what you want to achieve is this sentiment here, is that you're dealing with the right people that know your brand, they're happy with your brand, and they trust your brand. And when I say brand here, can be your business, can be your product, but essentially they trust what you've built. they're satisfied with what you're providing to them as a business owner, and they're the right type of people that you want to be dealing with. So those are just the kind of, coming to the same page of marketing. That's all it is. I want to touch upon the challenges and trends, and then we're going to take just a short 1 minute break in case anyone have any questions. So what's new, right? There's definitely a rise in digital tools, and that's going to stay the same. There's AI, there's so many different new technologies being created. That's just something that's always going to be the case. There's a heavy reliance on word of mouth and community, meaning people are dialing back and going to the trust factor. If a friend of mine says they trust something, I'm more likely to trust it, right? It's that confirmation bias, and that is still relevant. There's a focus on partnership and collaboration. So again, seeing, for example, social media influencers, get big with when they're promoting a brand, or brands choosing very carefully and intentionally the type of people they're looking to collaborate with. That's again building into that word of mouth and community piece that I just talked about. And then there's an everlasting data-driven decision-making process. So people, again, like I said, they change. And so as a brand, as a business owner, I want to learn and I want to use data to make sure that I'm not just shooting darts in the dark. I want to make sure that whatever I'm changing, I'm adjusting, I'm tweaking is based on real data that I've gathered from my customers and I can feel confident about. So that's what's relevant, and that's fairly self-explanatory as well. But there are challenges, and especially when it comes to a small business owner. There's constant shifts in customer perspectives. So meaning, today, one of my customers has a certain sentiment, and tomorrow it might change because of the various economical and socioeconomical factors that exist in the world today, right? That's a very relevant topic. There's an increase in cost and budget constraints. Again, self-explanatory, but such a huge challenge for small business owners, especially because not only do they have a lack of expense, they also have a lack of time and resources and expertise. So when all of this comes together, it's fairly normal for a business owner to feel really just sort of, bogged down and overwhelmed with things. So I do want to acknowledge that it's not easy being a small business owner. In fact, it's probably one of the toughest things to do out there. And I totally acknowledge that sentiment for sure. The last thing here that I want to touch upon is there's this reliance on all things digital, which, again, considering the rising number of tools and things like that and technologies, that is self-explanatory too. People think it's a bad thing that you're not tech savvy. They kind of treat it as like a stigma. I disagree with that. I think, for example, if you don't like social media, then as a business owner, you're not going to find a positive experience within that. So there needs to be a way around it, but it is a challenge, most definitely. What stayed the same? The number one thing, again, I'm going to touch upon this repeatedly, is that we need to retain a customer-centric approach. Everything needs to come back down to your customer. If we just generalize an assumption, right? Or if we're just second guessing, we are not going to be very successful when it comes to something like sales or something like marketing or, getting the numbers there. All of that is going to get hindered unless we kind of come back to who my customer is, what do they like, what are they looking for, what are their challenges, etc. You also want to make things work for you and not the other way around. So if, for example, you are not a fan of any one particular social media, there is nothing set in stone that says you have to be part of it. The only consideration you might make is, well, if one of my customers, if a target audience of mine is on that platform, then maybe I might give it a thought because it's relevant to them. But you have to make things work for you, right? You also want to use both digital and traditional methods, meaning the QR codes that you see on the phone these days, it's fine to put them on flyers, right? Flyers are as relevant as something like a Google review online. So it just depends on how you use them, and of course, the customer that you're using them with. You need to be consistent in branding. So if there are if there is a particular scheme of colors that you use, make sure it's the same throughout your brand and throughout your website, throughout your social media. If you're using specific messaging or specific type of vocabulary or have a certain mood around your content and it works and you want to stick to it. You want to build cohesiveness and consistency. And again, you want to make better decisions by learning continuously. That never stops and it will never stop. So I've talked a fair bit. Before we actually get into the chunk of, putting that whole definition of marketing and those steps into action, I just want to take a pause here and see if we have any questions, if anyone wants any clarification or just any thoughts on anything, please. All right, I don't think that is the case. I'm just going to continue. If someone does have any questions, feel free to stop me. There is no problem with that, and I'll be happy to answer any questions. All right, so we're going to simplify digital marketing. We're going to actually look into how it's done so that at the end of this workshop, you take away certain steps and certain, next action items for yourself when you're dealing with your own business. So there's different phases. And I know at the beginning I said, there's nothing that's set in stone. There is not a particular way, but something like this does make your thought process more intentional, right? Which is really important. So the way that I want us to think about marketing again, and these are segregated, in the way that those questions were segregated. You want to start off with your customers. You want to move over to the intent or your objective. You want to think about telling your story through the right type of messaging. You want to be present in the right places and establish the correct channels that are relevant to your audience. And once you execute all of that, you want to collect your data and analyze it to learn. So this feedback loop that you see on the bottom here, that circular, that path never stops. It's consistently a process. So I want you to think of it as a marathon rather than a sprint. And that's how you're going to get better at marketing. So I want to take an example scenario, and what I'm actually going to take is something that's relevant to all of us here today, and that is marketing a workshop. For the sake of simplicity, we're going to stick to a virtual workshop in this example scenario, but it's an example because, having been responsible, for example, for trying to market different programs and workshops, this is something that I have consciously, intentionally done in this same mannerism in my own work, right? So it's something that you guys would be able to relate with, but also something that I can truly attest and speak to. So phase number one, we're going to start with understanding our audiences, and then we're going to repeat that part a few times till we get it right. The way that I want you to think about your audience is through a persona. And again, this is another marketing lingo, like a terminology that you're going to find floating around when you converse with a marketer. But it's basically coming down to segregating your audience first, understanding about their interests, their psychographics, their personality traits, their characteristics, and then segregating them into smaller groups so that instead of, for example, 100 individual customers, you're going to have 5 different groups of customers that share common interests or share common challenges. So what that's going to do is it's going to minimize the people you have to target, but it's also going to club them together and make them easier to understand, right? How you can collect such information is through actually talking to your existing customers, and that is the simplest way that you can actually do this. Of course, you can use something like online research to think about, what's in demand or what are consumer, traits these days. But your customers are the closest things to you that are kind of like that stamp of approval. So observe your interactions, see if you can observe their traits and their usage patterns. I guarantee you'll be able to do that if you kind of read between the lines just a little bit more. And then once you've gathered that data, just make note of it, note it down, right? Just keep it in your mind, and then create a persona out of it. You can use something like HubSpot's free generator to do that. But essentially what a persona is this, what you see on the screen. So I created one as part of not only this exercise, but as part of the process that I took trying to market one of my past workshops, right? I've named this persona Summer. You can feel free to, put a name on the persona so that it's more human-like. But in our case, Summer is female. She's 28 years old. She comes from Boston. Those are your typical demographic traits that you're going to look at, right? But what I'm more interested in are their skills and interests. So Summer, in this case, she's very community driven. She's been into social networking. She's brand conscious, which means for me, if I'm marketing a workshop, for example, through the city of Somerville, I know that the city of Somerville, the economic group, the development initiatives also, they have some weight when it comes to their brand. So that makes marketing a little bit easier for me as a marketer, right? Some other interest of hers that she likes animal and live music. It might be that this may be some of the things we use, like animals or live music in the future when we're trying to market to her or build a relationship. As a background, she has a PhD, she's a PhD candidate, but she's also a part-time dog walker. So it'd be interesting to see how that particular piece of information comes into play when we're looking to talk to Summer. She does face those challenges, though. She's got a hectic lifestyle. She has time restraints. Of course, PhD candidate and a dog walker. It's no easy task. She has a lack of funds because she's trying to do everything herself. So therefore, she's price sensitive. This means that I cannot price my workshop at $500 because we're going to lose out on Summer, who seems to be one of our key audiences. She lacks a bit of the new, meaning she's looking for new things to open up. But she also misses her hometown, which kind of can be something emotional that she's dealing with that may also hinder some of these other challenges. Her goals here in this case are that she's looking for new experiences. She's looking for convenience because, again, she doesn't have a lot of time. But the important bit here, that very last bullet point, says she wants to start a doggy daycare and she's looking for education on it. That is an outlier, meaning that screams out to me the most when I'm trying to figure out my audience and build a good fit of people that I really want to market to. Because a workshop, for example, this digital marketing workshop is going to be relevant to her, right? So that straight away is a point that I can take and start building a relationship with her as we go on into marketing, to such audiences. We also want to keep in mind her communication preferences. So how does she want to interact, right? And this is going to be relevant when it comes to messaging in our channels. But she likes, for example, organic human interaction, meaning she's going to be receptive towards a personalized email or even a phone call, right? She makes heavy use of social media. So she's a PhD candidate. She uses social media. What that tells me is maybe LinkedIn is probably a better platform to find people like Summer as compared to something like Instagram or Pinterest, right? She's also driven by word on the street. So if there is another individual like Summer who can, maybe who's part of that group of people that Summer belongs to as a persona, then maybe we can get the word around and they can start building just some leads out of themselves, right? So this on here on a page is your persona. What you want to do is build a couple of more of these so that you're not leaving any of the audiences out. At the same time, I want to say that you don't have to include everyone because, again, you're not going to say no when it comes to, letting anyone deal with your business. But if you have a certain type of individuals that you don't want to engage with, that are not a good fit for your business, and that will always be the case, that there are certain categories like that, that's fine, right? That's not a bad thing at all. So once we've gone through that, we've achieved an understanding of who we're dealing with. I want to identify our goal, right? So what is our goal? Is it to build a better customer experience? Is it to make our brand easier to find on Google through a better digital presence? Is it more about community involvement and us putting out their information of how we have or how my business has been part of the community and gives back, right? So for our case, what I've done here on the table on the right that you see, and this is going to get filled up as we go, just to kind of monitor the progress that we're making here. I've put in increase our workshop awareness, right? And that's the goal or the intent of why I would do marketing or digital marketing in this case. And Summer is the audience that I'm really targeting. A couple of tips here. So what you want to do is you want to break down your overall goal, which is your what you want to achieve, into smaller versions. So think about the why and the how. If I want more customers, for example, to be aware of my workshop, how can I make this possible, right? Are there any digital activities, for example, that I can do, such as, I don't know, something like a promotion, something like an ad that makes sense for me to get that awareness? Are these the right activities? Is my target audience, summer, going to be, again, receptive towards ads if I do something like an ad promotion? Or is it more about sending her a personalized email through a simple Outlook, couple of buttons here and there, and then just send that email across, and maybe that's something that she's more receptive towards. So it needs to come down to the how we can achieve our what, which is our goal, and then who it relates to. So once we've done that, we've gotten an understanding of who our audience is, what our goal is. We want to come down to actually creating the conversations, which is the messaging. So we want to choose, what do we say, right? If it's increasing the workshop awareness, what I want to do is I want to focus on what each audience member or each target, each category of my audience finds valuable. Summer, in her case, if you go back, if you remember, we talked about her starting a new daycare business for dogs. So in that case, I'm pretty sure she's going to be, helped by any kind of business resources that I give her. So it might be that I talk about launching a business that might be relevant to her. So I talk to her using those cues. I create content around what my customer would want to search for so that it increases the likelihood of my awareness, right? And that's only half of it in this case. The really important point here is a call to action. So if I give you a scenario of me sending Summer a LinkedIn message that talks to her and says, "Hey, Summer, we think you might be a good fit for a workshop that's coming up. This workshop is geared towards, allowing you to get the fundamentals on how to launch your new business, how to market it in the right way, and how to make sure that operationally you're all set up so that, you can keep the business afloat when you first launch." We've got our attention at this point, but the problem with this is that we've just kind of left her on the hook, right? And this happens with so many small business owners that they don't realize that this is the case. They don't leave off their customers with a next step, and that is extremely important. We need to end with a call to action. So what that call to action might be, in Summer's case, if we are trying to get them to register to a workshop, it might be a register now. I send her a link on the LinkedIn message that I sent her previously, right? So she knows where she needs to go to register. We're not leaving her, just hanging. We're telling her what to do and incentivizing that. So that's super important. Phase number 4, that's establishing your presence, and this is your channels. So on the right, we've gone through 3 phases in the past. We know who we're talking to. We know our goal. We know what we're going to say to them. Now it's a matter of where do we find them and how do we facilitate those conversations? Typically, and you might go back to yourself on how you found this particular workshop. People tend to do like a Google search, or maybe they use some other platform to search for something they're looking for. And then they find more information about what they're looking for on a website, or maybe on a social media platform, and then they take action on top of that. Again, look into how you found this workshop. It might have been through Google, and you found, another kind of page on maybe something like an event platform like Eventbrite, and there you went to register, and then you got an email saying, "Hey, here's your link," and now you're here. So that whole journey is really important to keep in mind, and you want to cover the basics. The basics are typically going to be Google search, your Google business profile, which is, when you search for like a restaurant, a list of profiles pop up with those stars, right? Those ratings. Those are your Google business profiles. Any in-person physical location will have such a profile. People tend to rely on these most when they're searching for different type of things. You're going to want to have a website when it comes to your business. And then, of course, optional, but depending on your audience, you might want to be present on social media platforms. The key in this case, however, is using a combination of both online and offline channels. This is what we call in marketing lingo omni-channel strategies, right? So omni-channel journey. We want to use both offline and online things We want to make sure that if you're allowing people to search for Google, it might be that they'll end up on the website, they schedule an inquiry, and then they talk to us over the phone, which is a very traditional way of conversation, right? And so through that through that conversation, we're able to help organize some registrations. We're able to help them, just get to where they need to be and register for our workshop. Or in the case of another business, it might be buy a product, or it might be sign up for a newsletter, right? That case may vary depending upon your business. So we need to create a list of those channels. On the right, you've got Google, you've got LinkedIn, because that's where we found Summer. We've got Eventbrite, because that is where all of the registration for the workshop lies. That's the whole mechanism. And then you've got your website. So in this case, City of Somerville, for example, has a website where you can go and also learn about the information there. So that kind of brings us to that mix of channels that we have identified. All right, so we've gone through the first four, or basically, more than half of that whole flow of marketing. But once we've come to this point and we execute all of this, we've got to let it simmer, right? We've got to let it pick up, give it some time, pick up some pace, because the next step that we're going to do after this is actually learn. We're going to learn what's working, what isn't working. We're going to improvise, adapt, and overcome. And this is where we collect the data and find what we need to change. So a couple of tips here, right? Use numbers, use analytics to measure the performance of your different digital channels, right? So in our case, when we were doing the workshop, Eventbrite as a platform allows us to monitor, for example, email communication. I am able to see the total number of people that I emailed to market the workshop. I'm able to see how many people opened that email, how many people opened and clicked on a link versus how many people opened and did not do anything. I'm able to see how many people did not open or get the email at all, right? So once I learned, for example, out of 100 people, only 20 are opening, what are the reasons behind that 20% open rate? Is it that my subject in the email is not the right one, that I need to change the content? Is it that they're not getting my email at all? They might be running into their spam and they're not noticing their spam. So there can be a couple of different reasons for that to happen. And the main thing here is we put some kind of adjustments into play. I might change the frequency of email. I might change the time of the day that I'm sending that email. It might be that I just use a different domain that's still relevant to my business to send that email. So what that might be can be a little bit different, but the main idea is that we need to learn from it. Similarly for a website, and this is a scenario that I deal with often when it comes to especially e-commerce businesses, for example, is analytics for the website. So Google Analytics is a really strong tool that you can use, and you should be using, in fact, as part of your website. It'll let you see all kinds of visitor statistics. How many people came to you? Did they come to you from Google, from Bing, from a social media, or did they search for you directly? What that looks like, all of that is laid out in Google Analytics. The main idea, again, is that I want to learn from it. And then I want to make those changes that can possibly either move the number up. If the number goes up, that means I'm doing something right. If it goes down, then that means it's not really working. And remind yourself of what I said in the beginning of this workshop is there's no set path. There's no right way. It's always going to change. It's always going to evolve. And what it's going to come down to is how people like Summer are actually responding to the changes and to the different, practices that you're using, and how relevant it is for them. The one thing I also want to note here is this doesn't need to just be, for example, for digital practices like your website or something like Eventbrite or something like, your Facebook analytics through the Meta Business Suite. It can be for in-person conversations. So feel free to use those chances of one-on-one conversations with your customers to maybe, ask them to fill out a questionnaire using a Google form, right? You can use a QR code again for Google reviews. Of course, you're not going to give them a lot to do because the main idea is make it simple for them to do so that they actually do it, rather than give them like a survey or a questionnaire that has 30 questions that they really need to think about, right? That's not going to work. But again, if something like that doesn't work, it's a learning experience. So I want you guys to learn from all of this and all of the things you've executed so that you can go back to the feedback loop here, right? This is that diagram again. And this is why that feedback loop is really important, is when we start from our audience, identify our goal, tell our story, establish a presence, we do want to improvise, adapt, and overcome, and then continue repeating that process. And that brings us to the result, is you're going to have this kind of like a table, which is again a simplified version of that, what that execution looks like. But this, once you have this in your hand in front of you, everything else becomes more organized. You know what to do. You're intentional about who you're dealing with. You're intentional about what your goal is. And the main idea here is to build more such, for example, such results like this for different personas. Someone named Jack, for example, as a persona might have different traits. So you want to replicate this whole framework for them as well. You might have different goals. One of your goals might be, I need to increase my sales. I want to sell more products. So that goal replaces what you see here on the screen. And then you're going to, tally everything in terms of messaging your channels according to that particular goal. And you're going to do it again from a very, very customer-centric point of view. And that brings us to this result of this, this whole marketing framework. I want to pause here before I move ahead again for any questions, because I do want to get into the digital tools just a little bit. So if anyone does have any questions, now is a really good time to ask them.
I want to ask, you mentioned when we email our existing customer about something, a news or newsletter or something like that. If they open the email, I would get a notification. How I would know that they opened the email or not?
That's a good question. So there's a couple of different ways you can actually do that. So again, this might vary scenario to scenario, but sticking to our example of like, for example, if I triggered an email through a platform like Eventbrite, it's letting me monitor that statistic. So some platforms, and you might also have heard of the term CRMs, like MailChimp, that's a very popular one, that will let you send out those emails and monitor how they're performing. So when someone opens it, you'll see that, okay, these email addresses opened it. This is the number of percentage of people that opened it, took action, et cetera, et cetera. It's a little bit harder to do when you're using something like, for example, your personal Gmail, right? And you're using your Gmail to send out like an email to someone. You typically wouldn't know if they've opened it or not. Outlook, as another tool, sometimes allows for that functionality where I can choose in my settings that it notifies me every time someone has opened my email when it's been delivered. So again, it's dependent somewhat on the tool, which again, it's coming back to that importance of choosing the right tool. So I'm not sure if you are using a tool like that, but typically a lot of them allow for something like that. Does that
So
make sense?
yes, I don't use other email options. I just got to know that is the other link that you said, LinkedIn or Eventbrite.
Mhm.
I only use Google.
Uh-huh.
I have Gmail for my business. So that's
Yep.
why I didn't know this option. So I asked you.
Yeah, no, that's perfectly fine. Like a lot of these, like for example, MailChimp is one that I've used and I've had clients use in the past as well, as an example. It has like a free version, so you don't typically have to pay for it. Some clients like to just sign up on MailChimp and use like that as handling everything, which is what a CRM does. It tracks your conversations with your clients. So it might be that can be like a tool that you want to look into. And maybe give it a try, right? Because I
Okay.
do want to track that communication. Like, and the reason for that is, let's say you send out 10 emails, right? And
Right.
only two people open it.
Mm-hmm.
You also want to make sure that one, those two people did open it, but at the same time, like you want to follow up with them, right? You want to know how long, like when did they open it? Or if they took any action or something, if it had a link. So you also those follow-up communications that go out after like an initial, introduction, that's also super important. Which again, when you're using like a personal Gmail, it becomes a little harder to track, right? And that's a challenge in the past
Yeah.
that I've run into, for example, when I used to do freelance graphic design, is I'm like, are people even opening my emails? And so using something like MailChimp that is free uh, can possibly be the way to go. And there are other tools like that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I will look into it. It's really good advice. I did use Gmail, and last event that I was hosting,
Mhm.
so I sent those email to my regular customer who sign up,
Right.
who gave me their number and their email addresses, and a lot of them, they email me back and let me know that they're coming, they're exciting to to
Mhm.
get that meal and buy the ticket. And some of them, they told me that they let me know where they moved and stuff, when they moved. So I was thinking like there'd be a easy way to who did not open, didn't care, and
Mhm.
also who told me that they don't no longer stay in Boston, cannot
I
come
see.
even though they like my food, but they cannot come. Maybe exclude next time. They don't want to see the same email, coming.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like one of those learning experiences, I think. So you mentioned the word newsletter, right? Um,
Yeah.
Again, like it's typically why something like a newsletter is important because you're essentially allowing people to say yes to receiving communication from you. And then you're using one piece of, say, information, right? And you're sending it over to like 10 people.
Right.
Um, and so that's why it's kind of like one of those more preferred communication techniques where it's low effort. It just has this upfront cost of creating like a newsletter, but then you can send it over, and then you can also track it. So that's why, like, if I were in your case, and considering that you told me about your kitchen-based business, right? It's a food
Right.
business. Sometimes you will also have like you must have heard of Toast, right? As a POS
Yes.
system.
Web. Yeah.
Those
It was.
type of POS systems also have email communication functionalities that'll allow you to track that email. So it's not that you have to do like a separate MailChimp
Mm,
account that you can simply do that through Toast. Because
yeah.
you would already have that contact list built in. You can send them a personalized email and then it'll allow you to track that communication side of it.
Yeah.
So that's
I
the other
think
thing I want to think about.
the Toast POS system you have to buy.
Yeah,
Then
so
they work for you.
it's
Yeah.
kind of, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I
Um,
worked in a food industry before my catering started, many places. So um, I a little bit of familiar with the Toast, how it's nice, very nice. Particular, there's a picture, there is in a section that you can take order, because I used to work at the front with
right.
dealing with the customer register. So it was but they cost money.
Yeah, they do. And that's with any POS system. They
Right.
typically will have those functionalities, but not all businesses need a POS.
Mm,
Actually, like if it's like a retail store in-person thing, then most definitely they would have. But nowadays, all of these such tools, they're kind of hybrid. They do multiple things.
yeah.
Um, so it's kind of like which one fits again, like your toolkit, which one do you want to use?
I use Square Terminal.
I see. Okay.
Um, yeah.
Yeah. All
Thank you
right.
for your answer, though.
Perfect. No, yeah. I'm just going to touch upon a couple of things here when it comes to tools. So hopefully that can kind of, even clarify some other things. Uh,
Absolutely.
so there's certain, there's different categories of tools that you would essentially want, like as a small business owner, right? And what I've done here is once you have some more, you'll get these slides and you'll get this recorded session too, but go through these different functionalities, right? You're going to need something that's for digital presence. So something like Google Business Profile, something I highly, highly recommend, especially for in-person stores.
Yeah.
You're going to have those regular social media type accounts for your digital presence and visibility. You might have something like Yelp that you can use. When it comes to website builders and hosting, you can use something like WordPress to build your website. Squarespace is another popular one. Uh, you've got Wix. So there are different tools that you can pick from, but essentially what you want to make sure is you're getting the categories right. You've got your digital presence covered, you've got a website covered, you've got social media management covered, if that is something that that you'd like to just to kind of double down on, right? Some businesses
Yeah.
may benefit from it, some may not. But if it's, for example, like a really people-oriented business, especially with younger audiences, social media typically tends to be, a good way to engage with them. And so Meta for Business allows you to like control your Meta accounts, meaning your Instagram, your Facebook, and groups and things like that, just through one business suite. So that's really easy to use. You can use something like Later, which is a bit more complex. But again, depending on the scale and the functionality you're looking for, might be a good option. Canva is really good to design content, and then also has some AI functionalities there. And there's relations, so this customer relationship category, this is the one which has those, tracking of emails and communication and things like that. The two most relevant ones are HubSpot and MailChimp. There are others, most definitely. HubSpot, in this case, I do want to say is a bit more expensive. It's for businesses that have a higher scale. Our company, Revby, for example, uses HubSpot. And it allows us to, control scheduling and control emails right from within the dashboard. And it lets us do a lot of tracking as well. At the same time, if you're looking for something that's free, allows you to do something like a newsletter, track emails, build a contact list, all of that, MailChimp is fine, right? It has a free version. The paid version isn't all too expensive if it's something that fits the scale of your business. So again, that might be something that you can potentially explore. Um, POS systems, again, for a retail business or any kind of commerce or e-commerce, that's important. Square and Shopify, those are typically, the more generic ones. There's Clover as well. And then there are those that are more suited for a particular industry. Toast, like I said, is more for that food retail business. There might be others such as Klaviyo, which is for appointments, really good booking system, but also more complex. So again, you want to figure out which one is good for you. You do want to have something that you can book and schedule calls with. People these days are looking for that, okay, let me just go ahead on this website and schedule a meeting or something like that. Calendly is the tool that, most people, most business owners use. It's also very easy to use, so that's one I'd recommend. And then HubSpot, again, going back to that paid large scale variation of that is something that lets you do that as well. So you've got some more here that I'm gonna, for the sake of time, I'm gonna allow you guys to go through at your own time. Also, I've also got some checklist items and some best practices. So please, when you do receive these slides, go through these. Make sure you're able to create a check mark next to each one of those. It'll help you get to a really solid online presence standard. And once you have that, that anxiety of, okay, am I doing everything right in terms of digital marketing? That gets reduced for a small business owner. And that's really important. So just go through this when you have some time. Stick to that approach, that diagram that I showed you. And yeah, that's kind of all digital marketing really is. The one thing I do want to say is when it comes to these tools, the best way to understand if a tool is good for you is one, figure out the pricing if it fits your budget, if it fits your expenses. Two, make sure the functionalities are those that you need. Three, make sure that the complexities are those that you're okay with. So if you don't want anything too complex, don't get something that's way too complex. But the main important point is call them, call the customer service, call the support, and have a conversation with them to go through these things. Chances are, if you don't have a pleasant experience with, the service provider or any of these tools, then you're not going to have a good experience when you're dealing with them. So, for example, Squarespace, not pointing fingers, but it's hard to get them on a call. And if you're fine with that, if that's not really a relevant point for you to pick or not pick them, that's fine. But if it is something that you want in terms of, hey, I want them to be on the phone with me instantly, and that's not going to get that's not going to be the experience that you have, then it might not be a good choice for you. So give them a call, have your list of questions ready, and then evaluate these tools based on the functionalities, complexities, and the pricing structure that they provide you with. So that being said, I want to wrap things up. I do want to leave some time for any more questions. I hope this has been helpful for everyone that is here. Hopefully not too complex, because I know, there's so many different ways to think about it. But I'll stop blabbering and I'll let you guys ask me anything you'd like.
So are we gonna get the slides or the video by email?
Yeah, so Kelly, I think I'm happy to send them over too, but I think Kelly might just send them over through her end. Kelly, is that right?
Yeah. I can send an email out with the slides, and then the video, we're going to upload it to YouTube, so it might take a couple of days, but I can send a follow-up email once that is available on our YouTube.
Thank you.
Perfect. Anything else, guys, before we wrap up here? I think not.